Hi everyone, this is Kevin here, and in this video, we're going to be comparing the Moto G7 Play with Alexa to the ZTE Blade Max View. So there's a couple of reasons why I made this comparison video. The first reason is because I have both of these devices, and I've had the ZTE Blade Max View for a little bit now. I actually got it back in the fall, and full disclosure, ZTE sent this to me, and ZTE sent me to CES, all expenses paid, back in January, so I've done a lot with them, but they always encourage me to be unbiased, as I'd always be anyway. So just keep that in mind, but I did want to disclose that right at the beginning of the video so there's no confusion. The second reason why I was really excited to do this comparison is because both of these devices are very similar in price. When the Blade Max View was first launched, late last year, it was launched at $199. Currently, it's available for $149. And the Moto G7 Play with Alexa, which was released very recently, is currently offered for $199. So these two devices are very similar in price, a $50 price difference at the moment. So they're both very competitive in that aspect. And the third reason why I'm excited to make this comparison video is because of the carrier support from both of these devices. So both of these devices are compatible with AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and Sprint. Now for Sprint, you actually have to do an extra step. You have to contact Sprint and basically set it up through them. But for AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon, literally all you have to do is take your activated SIM card, stick it in here, and you're good to go. And it's actually pretty rare to find unlocked devices that work with Verizon. Usually, unlocked devices just work with GSM carriers such as AT&T and T-Mobile. So seeing that both of these devices are factory unlocked and they work with Verizon is amazing. So if you're a Verizon user, you're in luck here. Now that I've pointed out those similarities, there's a lot of differences between these two devices. The first difference is the display size. Now the Moto G7 Play with Alexa features a 5.7-inch display, and the ZTE Blade Max View features a 6-inch display. So the display on the ZTE Blade Max View is larger, and actually, considering that the Blade Max View does not have a notch compared to the G7 Play, which does, you can definitely see that there's a lot more screen real estate with the Blade Max View. Especially when putting these two devices up next to each other with the bottoms even here, you can see how much extra display there is at the top of the Blade Max View. So definitely out of these two devices, I would say that the Blade Max View is the more practical of the two. But on the other hand, with the way that trends are going nowadays, especially in 2019, the G7 Play having that notch is definitely up with the times. So the design of the Blade Max View is certainly a little more traditional, a little more old-fashioned, I suppose. Kind of looks like something out of 2017. But from a pure practicality standpoint, you could probably argue that the Blade Max View is more practical in design, since if you're watching movies and things like that, you're not going to have to worry about the notch getting in the way. But another thing to keep in mind is that the Blade Max View is physically larger, significantly larger really, than the Moto G7 Play. You can see how much taller it is, and the Blade Max View definitely has some large bezels on the bottom and top. I mean, you can see, look at this lip down here. This is pretty ridiculous. I mean, it's a pretty large lip, and same thing with the top. But this is kind of embarrassing. With the G7 Play, not only do you have a notch on the top, but on the bottom you have a massive bezel as well, with Motorola branding. I noticed that in my unboxing of the Moto G7 Play, a lot of people were kind of making fun of that and kind of clowning the fact that there's such a large bezel here on the bottom, even with this device having a notch, and I totally agree. But on the other hand, it's a budget device, so sometimes there's weird compromises like that. Now the display resolution of the Moto G7 Play is 720p, and the display resolution of the Blade Max View is 1080p. So it is a higher resolution on the Blade Max View, but to be honest, when you look at both of these displays, I'll admit the display on the Blade Max View looks a lot better, but the display on the Moto G7 Play certainly isn't bad. Both displays look really sharp and clear, and both displays are going to be good for web browsing and watching videos, and pretty much anything where you're relying on the display to look good. So I certainly wouldn't let the resolution be something that kind of draws you away from the G7 Play. Both devices feature 8 megapixel front-facing cameras, and with the Moto G7 Play, we get a front-facing flash, which is something that you don't get with the ZTE Blade Max View. Both devices feature 32 gigabytes of internal storage with the ability to expand that with a microSD card, and neither of these two devices offer wireless charging. On the back side, both devices feature fingerprint sensors for unlocking. They're both very quick and they both work really well. On the G7 Play, we have one camera here on the rear, which is 13 megapixels with an LED flash. And on the Blade Max View, we have dual cameras, which means that you're going to get portrait mode, which is awesome to see. And the main camera is 16 megapixels and the secondary camera is 2 megapixels. Internally, the Moto G7 Play features 2 gigabytes of RAM, and the ZTE Blade Max View features 3 gigabytes of RAM, so you get a little bit more RAM with the Blade Max View. Now, the Motorola has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 632 processor, and the Blade Max View has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 435 processor. So we're getting a better processor with the Moto G7 Play. So that's actually a pretty big deal, to be honest. It's definitely a lot more modern of a processor with this device, and combining that with a 720p display, you're going to get good efficiency here. Video recording with the G7 Play actually maxes out at 4K at 30 frames per second. I was really surprised about that. And with the Blade Max View, video recording maxes out at 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now, if you'd like me to do a dedicated photo and video comparison between these two devices, let me know because I'd love to do that. I'm just not doing it in this video. And the battery capacity of the G7 Play is 3000 milliamp hours with fast charging, and the battery capacity of the Blade Max View is 4000 milliamp hours. Now with the Motorola, we get Android 9 Pie, and with the Blade Max View, we get Android 8.0 Oreo. And I don't think the Blade Max View will be ever updated to Pie, just because they just updated it a few months ago to Oreo. So that's kind of a downer. I really wish that they would have just updated the Blade Max View right to Pi. So I don't think we're ever going to get Pi with this device. So if that's important to you, then I would definitely maybe consider getting the Moto G7 Play. Now that we've compared the specifications of these two devices, let's now compare the hardware. So I already went over the displays of these two devices. We're getting that 720p 5.7-inch display on the G7 Play and the 1080p 6-inch display on the Blade Max View. Of course, looking at these two devices, the G7 Play certainly looks more like something you'd expect to find in 2019, whereas the Blade Max View features a more classic, traditional design that still looks good, don't get me wrong, but certainly maybe is a little bit outdated. And then up top, once again, we have 8 megapixel cameras on both devices with a front-facing flash on the G7 Play. On the top of these two devices, we get noise-canceling microphones and we get 3.5mm headphone jacks. On the bottom of these two devices, on the G7 Play, we have the microphone and we have the USB Type-C port. And on the ZTE Blade Max View, we have the microphone, the speaker, and a USB Type-C port. So it's great to see that both of these devices feature USB-C because that's really the future, and you don't see that a whole lot. You're seeing it more and more though with lower end devices, but it's just great to see that both of these have USB-C. On the left side of these two devices, on the Moto G7 Play, we have the door for the SIM card and micro SD card, and we have the same exact thing on the ZTE Blade Max View. And then on the rear of these two devices, on the Moto G7 Play, we have the rear-facing camera, which is 13 megapixels, we have the LED flash, and we have the fingerprint sensor. And essentially, we have the same setup here on the ZTE Blade Max View, but we have the dual cameras here with a 16 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel secondary camera. The materials on the backside of these two devices are different as well. We have a nice plastic material on the G7 Play that does absorb some fingerprints, and we have kind of a matte, rubbery looking material on the Blade Max View, which also absorbs fingerprints. I can't really decide on which one I like better. They both absorb fingerprints in kind of an equal level. But fortunately, there's cases out there for both of these devices. In fact, there's a new line of cases from Tudia that you can get for the ZTE Blade Max View. So you'll probably be covering up the backside anyway, and I would highly recommend it because having a case is always the best way to go. But I guess it's still important to know what kind of material is on the backsides of these devices. Alright, now let's do a speed test comparison with these two devices. So we'll start up Google Chrome. 1, 2, 3, go. And the Moto G7 Play was first to pull up Chrome. Let's now go to yahoo.com. 1, 2, 3, go. The Moto G7 Play was also first to start up Yahoo. Let's go to engadget.com. 1, 2, 3, go. And again, Moto G7 Play is faster. Let's go to this article. 1, 2, 3, go. And the Moto G7 Play was faster at starting up the article. Let's go to the camera. 1, 2, 3, go. G7 Play was quicker at starting up the camera. So in that unscientific speed test there, it definitely looks like the G7 Play is the quicker of the two devices. And that makes sense because the Qualcomm Snapdragon 632 processor that's on this device is better than the Qualcomm Snapdragon 435 with the Blade Max View. So here are the boxes for the two devices. We're going to compare now what's included in both of them. So both devices feature a wall adapter. So one is Motorola branded and the other is ZTE branded. They also both feature USB Type-C cables, so these are used for charging and data transfer. Both devices include quick start guides. And they both include SIM card removal tools. Alright, so now wrapping up this comparison, I'd like to give you my final opinions about these two devices. So clearly there's a lot of pros and cons with both of these. You're getting a larger display with the ZTE Blade Max View, and this display looks better, so that's definitely a big plus. But on the other hand, you're getting a much better processor with the Moto G7 Play. But you get an extra gigabyte of RAM with the ZTE Blade Max View, and you get a internal battery that's 1,000 milliamp hours larger. So it's really tough to just pick one that's better than the other. I suppose it kind of depends on your personal needs. Now, a big one for me is that the Moto G7 Play has Android 9 Pie. That's really good to see. And there's also a ton more accessories out there for the Moto G7 Play. One of the crazy things is that there haven't even been any cases that have come out for the ZTE Blade Max View until recently, which is that one case by Tudia. It's a good case and everything, but there's way more accessories available for the Moto G7 Play. Now, one other thing is that the ZTE Blade Max View is $50 cheaper than the Moto G7 Play, so that's another big difference. I think for me personally, I'd probably go with the G7 Play if I had to pick one of the two, mostly because of the better performance. But I'm interested to know what you think. Which of these two devices would you buy if you were given the choice? And do you own one of these two devices already? I'd love to know in the comment section below. But thank you so much for watching, everybody. This is Kevin here, and make sure to check out the video description for the latest prices of both of these, because I'm sure they've probably changed since the time of me making this video. But have a great day. Bye.